Hi, everybody. My name is Ruth Marion, and I am with the Sleep Forum, and I am your host today. Today, we are speaking about sleep disturbances due to tinnitus and other conditions. My guest is R. Scott Armbruster, who has been living with chronic tinnitus for 32 years. He is going to tell us his journey about what it was like getting, how he first got tinnitus and also what it's like living with it. He's also going to share with us a solution that he came up with. So he can tell you the story a lot better than I can. So without further ado, my friend and guest today, Scott.
Well, thank you first, Ruth, for having me. Always a lot of fun, enjoyable to speak with you and your audience, of course. Yes, I am R. Scott Armbruster. I am the CEO of Armbruster Enterprises that owns the company Sound Pillow. And as Ruth mentioned, I have been living with chronic tinnitus for going on 32 years. The journey of how I got from point A to point B, from the point A of not having tinnitus to having tinnitus, has a lot to do with my abuse of sound. When I was younger, we had the Walkman and the headphones, and I would generally listen to it louder than I should. And then I went into my professional world. My first degree is in radio, television, broadcasting. Therefore, I often routinely worked in a studio where I was putting, back in the day, we had songs that we put to carts. We put them on what you might think of as an 8-track tape player so that the jock could then slot it in and play the song. One of my more memorable moments is when Night Ranger came out with a song called Don't Tell Me You Love Me. And it starts off with boom, 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 boom. And I didn't want to just hear that bass. I wanted to feel that bass. I wanted to feel it rattling through my bones. So I pushed the volume all the way up as I'm putting the song into cart. And about halfway through, one of the disc jockeys came in, and I'll tone down the salty language, but he said, "Can you turn that darn thing down?" And I said to him, "I thought this was a soundproof room." And he said, "Yeah, so did we." That's how loud I was listening to it. From there, after I left the broadcasting game, I went into large-scale concert production, corporate events, fairs, festivals, firework displays, laser shows, and such. And you can imagine how loud a stadium is during a sound check, and there is no audience. And one of my jobs was to roll around the stadium and look for, we called hot spots, or places where the sound wasn't quite as loud as maybe it should be, and that we wanted to make sure that the audience had a good experience regardless of where they sat. So I would bounce around out in the stadium, and then I would point out the hot spots and we would adjust the sound. And then, of course, in live shows, it was exceptionally loud. One day in Helena, Montana, this is the fall of 1991, I was working with Rick Derringer and Edgar Winter, supporting a one-off gig, a one-off event in support of their Live in Japan album. And we were doing the lasers, a lot of laser effects. And I noticed that one of the effects was kind of becoming misaligned. And the one thing to understand about the lasers we were using back then is that they were incredibly powerful. I could literally light a cigarette off the beam of the light that came directly out of the laser head. And that meant we had to be very careful about shining those effects into an audience member's eyes, because you can imagine how bright that is and how quickly we could actually hurt somebody. So I noticed that an effect was going a little wrong. So I snuck in behind the speakers, stage left, and waited for the song to end. Rick went to center stage with Edgar. They were chatting, so I ducked in front of the stage left speaker stack real quickly to tighten down the mirror that was loosening and causing that laser effect to start dropping towards the audience. The challenge was the wing nut didn't grab the threads as quickly as I wanted. And so about the time I was finally tightening down that mirror, Rick turned to the mic, screamed rock and roll hoochie coo into the mic, and dropped me to the floor. I was roughly 6 inches. I'm not sure, about 6 inches from that speaker stack. And we had about 2,500 people in the audience. It was loud. I had a little bit of vertigo. My hearing was a little muffled, felt a little nauseous, and I got myself out of the venue. And I pulled myself together because, well, the show must go on and you can't quit now, and still had to be safe. Kind of got myself settled and then went back into the venue and finished off the gig. I noticed a few days later, though, that this time the tinnitus didn't go away. You've probably all experienced, if you went to a concert or a club, regardless of the size of the venue, that when you leave it, you will sometimes have this ringing in your head because the sound was too loud, and then it goes away. That's transitory tinnitus. Tinnitus that comes and goes. You know, that they call it ringing of the ears. I'm going to tell you it's in the brain. It's not my ears ringing. It's literally in my brain, but it never goes away. So flash forward a couple of years later, and I will use the name of the talent in this story because she has gone public with her tinnitus. And I'm at the front of house mix where all the soundboards are. That usually you kind of see that in the audience somewhere. We're facing center stage. And I started talking about this squeal in my head. And my audio engineer said, yeah, I've got that. And the intelligent lighting guy with me said, yep, I've got that. Turned to one of my very good friends who's an audio engineer. And he says, yep, I've got that. And I'm like, dear Lord, do we all have this? And they all said, yeah. Couple hours later, we're having a pre-meeting with the band and the talent. And I discovered that all of the talent's musicians had it, including the talent. In this case, the talent was Tanya Tucker. So I said, what do you do about it? Because this is an individual who has money and has means and can get on her plane and go anywhere in the world she wants to try to get this condition cured. And she said, there's nothing you can do about it. You're going to have to learn to live with it, get over it, and move on. So my response to her was, we've never met before, and I have a real hard time accepting that there's nothing I can do about it. Keeping in mind, we're still in 1992 or early 1993, pre-internet. I couldn't just go out to the computer, go to any kind of website to learn more about it. So I started talking to some of the doctors. And of course, my audiologist at that time, an ENT, said, nope, you're just going to have to learn to live with it and get over it. The challenge I was really having was at night. During the day, especially when you are up against the gun to make sure that the door is open and everything is ready to go, staging is set, sound is set, lighting is set, it's all tested, it all works. But you have a timeline. You've got to let that audience into the venue, whether it's 5,000, 10,000, or 50,000 people, they want in. So that kind of stress and that sort of hectic environment, I really didn't concentrate much on my tinnitus. I had other things to do.
Can I ask you one quick question? Is tinnitus something that is diagnosed?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the hearing test, when they give you the sounds and the pings, you put your thumb up, or I can hear this or that. They found the threshold where I could no longer hear their tones. And that's how they dialed in where my frequencies are with my tinnitus. Tinnitus also changes in volume, all sorts of fun. Mm-hmm. So there are, some days where it's lower than others, and that'll become actually an important aspect of part of the journey. So from that, I guess, realization that this sound in my head was not likely to ever go away, and it is a constant 24/7, 365, 366 on leap years condition. I always hear it. Yes, I can hear it now. It is never going to, well, it might go away. I'm going to say there's some hope, but I have at least accepted it may never go away. I've accepted I may never experience silence again. And I haven't experienced real solid silence since 1991, except for a couple of moments when I was scuba diving in December of this year, and I was 114 feet below the surface of the water, and it went away. for like 30 seconds. And it was just me listening to the ocean. So I've got some theories about water pressure and pressure and how that might affect tinnitus. If anybody wants to call me on that, I will have that conversation with you. But moving forward, it was really the nighttime. That was the challenge. I'm laying in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the squeal, and the lack of sleep made it worse, which also makes sense. We'll get to that in a moment as well. So along the way, I started experimenting with the concept of speakers in a pillow. And from there, we now get into the, so that was the late 90s. And then I started going to tinnitus research initiatives, University of Buffalo, University of Iowa. We're a bit more connected with the internet, and I'm doing some reading, but I would just, I'd call a doctor and say, hey, this is what I have. This is what I'm working on. And the one doctor that actually, I guess, was part of the proof of concept is Dr. Stephen Nagler. At that time, Dr. Nagler's clinic had a 2-year waiting list to get in to see him. I called Dr. Nagler for close to 6 months. And then one day he accidentally answered the phone. And I know he picks up the phone and he's like, hello. And I'm like, hi, Dr. Nagler, this is Scott Armbruster with Sound Pillow. And I'll soften the language a little bit again. He goes, oh, dear Lord, would you quit calling me? And I said, I can't. I have this constant sound in my head. I'm working on this idea and it's helping me. Side note, I had given one to my dad. Turned out he had tinnitus. It helped him. He gave it to a friend. Turned out she had tinnitus. It helped her. So we're starting to build this, not track record, but a very interesting little group of responses. So Dr. Nagler agreed to send the sound pillow to his 5 worst patients and then said to me, you will fail miserably and then never call me again. And I said, deal, I'm in, let's do it. So he sent out the 5 packages. I had a nice little sort of survey, in there. What did you think of the comfort, the sound? Did it help you? Some marketing questions. What do you think it's worth? How do you feel about the quality? And after the 5th response came in, I opened them all. We were 5 for 5. They all loved it. And that was cool. That was a cool moment. I believe that was 1996. So of course, okay, now I got to call Dr. Nagler again. And for whatever this time, he answered the phone on the very first try. So yay. And hello, Dr. Nagler, this is Scott Armbruster with Sound. He goes, oh, dear Lord, you promised to never call me again. I said, no, sir, that was not the deal. The deal was that I would fail miserably and then I would never call you again. And he said, oh, what you got? I said, dude, we're 5 for 5. And I started reading the letters to him. There was one person who sent, and I still have all these back at the office, a multi-page, double-sided, handwritten note that basically went on with, at first I got this product and honestly, I thought it was going to be BS, blah, 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 blah. He said, and I am so glad to be wrong. And then he told me about the experience and how he was using it and what it meant to him. And that was the impetus to keep moving forward. 2 weeks later, it turned out that Dr. Nagler was in Austin, Texas. So my wife and I drove up to see him, have dinner with him, and chat. And at that point, he said, okay, you might have something here. And these are the things I would recommend that you do about it. So I did. And a lot of it had to do with, for me, if I'm not going to use this product, I couldn't expect anybody else to use the product. So I took the design, ripped it apart, rebuilt it. I am blessed to work with a number of top-notch audiophiles and audio engineers. So when I went to them and said, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. I want to take the speakers and I want to do a unique frequency response. I want to push out a lot of power from the bass, put a bump in the intelligibility band, and then a lot of power in the high end. Because a lot of us with tinnitus or tinnitus, and you'll see I flow back either way, we have high frequency hearing loss as well. It's very common. So I wanted to put more power, more output in that higher frequency, but didn't want the sound to sound tinny. And that's where that bump in the intelligibility comes in. That's the frequencies in which we speak. It's the frequency range in which you're hearing my voice. And it sounded great. I mean, not just for a pillow. I mean, it sounded great. And we are all speaker snobs. Barry has done the sound for the Golden Globes, the Grammys, the Oscars. He has done support for NASCAR, Wolfgang Puck, Disney, Lucasfilm. So, and he has tinnitus. Go figure. We all had tinnitus. So I was really blessed to have a group of individuals who understood what I was trying to do. From there, it came to, well, what do I listen to? I mean, I can't, so what? I've got speakers on the pillow. Doesn't really matter. I don't know what to listen to. So I started buying up all the CDs. If at like Target, you go on, you see that Soundscapes kiosk. And if there was a CD with a lily pad, a dolphin, leaves of forest, whatever, I bought them all. I probably have 100 of them downstairs in my collection. And the challenge that I had with them was, one, the tracks were too short. You know, you get kind of into that comfy zone, it's 3.5, 4 minutes later, and then it would change. The other issue was when I was listening to, for example, one of the ocean tracks. Now, I love dolphins, but not squawking in my ear at 2 o'clock in the morning. I just want to hear the waves of the ocean. I love birds, but I don't want to listen to them in a chaotic, exchange between each other in the middle of the rainforest. I just want to hear something really super soothing and quiet. Couldn't find it. There was one track that I really liked, but it had a flute passage in it. And every time that flute passage came on, it would remind me of the opening sequence for Taxi. So yes, I'm old enough. I watched Taxi in its original form. And it would always start my head spinning. I'd start thinking about that crazy mechanic who also became the doc in Back to the Future. Back to the Future leads me over to, gosh, I wonder what this guy's doing now. And oh my gosh, Mary Lou Henner, I had the biggest crush on her when I was a kid. The mind just starts to race. So I started on a new journey. The journey was to find music that literally reminded me of nothing. And it turned out now there's a term for that. That's called non-emotional music. Reminds you of nothing. As humans, sound is very critical to our survival. Example, back in the day, we come out of the caves, we hear snapping in the woods. That's going to be an animal that's going to try to eat us. And now we're in fight or flight. And it was a kind of a defense mode. So now I wanted something that would remind somebody of nothing, not a good date, bad date, a wedding dance, nothing. And that took close to 5-6 years to find somebody who would work with me, who had the skills, because I love sound in music, but I only played the saxophone for 12 years. I through high school. I can't write music, but I knew what I was looking for. And then Dr. Jack Vernon called one day. He is the doctor who is credited as being the father of tinnitus. He's the one who discovered it. And he said, Scott, I like what you're doing. I hear what you're doing, what you're working on. And when you find it, make sure you include these types of sounds: white noise, nature sounds such as ocean, rain, stream. They're there. And then, of course, we had to have the white noise file, because everybody knows about the white noise file. And we released the first iteration of it. It only had about 12 tracks on it. The feedback was good. So then I started to expand it. 12 tracks went to 18 tracks. I added more noise files, added more of the layered non-emotional music with the nature sounds. And now we're up to 21 tracks, unofficially maybe 22, because I just made another one. And if I can get that cleared up this weekend, I'm going to release that shortly. I don't want to say what it is yet. And the feedback then started coming in from veterans. Did not know this, but it turns out that tinnitus is the #1 most compensated for injury in all of the military, bar none. Tinnitus. And it's that injury that no one sees. You can't tell if someone's got it. Got it out into the to the VA system. And then the phone calls came in from veterans who were dealing with PTSD, stating that it mitigated and in many cases eliminated their night terrors. I had never thought about the concept of being afraid to go to bed, just that concept. And in veteran lingo, they call that the DVD or the movie in their head. I call it a racing mind. And what they do when they were laying down in the dark with nothing to focus on is they start reliving whatever trauma they had experienced that gave them the PTSD. I'll give you one example. I will not get too graphic. I apologize, this can be a little graphic, but this is what happened. One of the veterans was telling me about her tinnitus. And so I asked her name is Mona, so I'll just say Mona. So, Mona, do you know how you got your tinnitus? And she said, well, I've been blown up 3 times. I don't know which one it did it. And then she launched and she told me a story about how she was walking down one of the streets, I believe it was Fallujah. And in mid-sentence, her colleague stepped on an IED and pink misted. He just went, he's gone. And that pink mist is the blood just going everywhere. And when she woke up, they were literally picking pieces of him out of her. And that's when she started telling me about what the system was doing for her because it stopped her nightmares. She wasn't waking up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat, terrified. And we kept pushing and kept trying to make it better and pushing because I felt an obligation as a citizen to help these people. And so I just kept pushing it forward and kept trying to design, the best product I could. One of our cool features is that we have an inline volume control on the Pillows cord, not just on the MP3 player. And that idea actually came from a veteran. He said, it'd be really cool if, and I said, you're right. And we did it. So it's the folks who were using it who would come back and say, here, this is what I like. This is what I don't like. And then I would tailor it and retailor it and retailor it. And that's how we came up with what is now known as the Sound Pillow Sleep System, or often referred to as the Sleep Pillow. You get called that quite a bit. At first, I was a little bummed out that they kept calling it the Sleep Pillow versus the Sound Pillow. But then it really dawned on me one day that they call it that because that's what it does for them. It helps them fall asleep. So I said, all right, if I can't beat them, I'll join them. And I took thesleeppillow.com. Because why not? And then we get directed through the website that way.
So
the goal really is about
with just a couple of quick questions. Scott, how many people live with tinnitus?
Great question. According to the American Tinnitus Association, ATA.org, 50 million Americans experience tinnitus at some level to some degree every day. Roughly 12 million are seeking remedy, means they're looking for a solution, and 1.5 million to 2 million people are debilitated by it.
No. That's a lot of people.
That's a lot of people. Most people are transitory, means you experience it short time. Whereas mine is chronic, unilateral, left side. And then all the fun, all the joy, I have transitory on the right side. So every now and then, for no reason at all, my right side will spark up and try to compete with my left side. And then I have the whole orchestra going on. And what I learned in the process, go ahead.
I just wanted you to touch a little bit on we spoke once about colors, music, the sound.
Oh, the pink noise, gray noise, red noise, white noise.
I want you to touch on that a little bit.
Okay.
Please.
Well, everybody's familiar with white noise. That's the real kind of coarse, staticky sound. Back in the day, you would tune between an AM station, or when the TV stations actually went dark at night, you'd have that white kind of fuzz on your screen. But then we started experiencing with blue noise. It's still a noise file, but it's not as harsh. If you think of the noise files as sandpaper and different grades of harshness to fine sandpaper, same kind of thing here. White noise is very coarse. Blue noise is not as coarse. It's kind of like blue noise sounds to me like a heavy light rain. And then there's varying degrees. My go-to track is red noise, which is also known as brown noise. And for me, red noise reminds me of sleeping on an airplane. It's a lower frequency, a little bit of a rumble to it. And since I had no choice in my first professional life for 20 years, I had to learn to sleep on airplanes. I was bouncing all over the country. So when I landed on red noise, not only did that work for me, but part of that discovery came from the fact I was on a hunt for my little sister, who has off the charts anxiety, borderline challenged adult. And I was throwing sounds at her for years. And then when I landed on red noise, tested it with her, she slept. Now she still takes her gabapentin and her other meds, but she slept. So red noise became her go-to track. She has 4 players with nothing on them but red noise.
Interesting. You know, we have a couple of questions. I want to just make sure that we get to them before we, end our session. But so let me go back up. Does hyperbaric oxygen therapy assist with tinnitus?
That's a great question. That is a great question. I don't know, but I would love to know. And here's why. In early December, first vacation in 5 years, I went scuba diving. I'm an avid scuba diver when I could do it. And I started to sort of key in on the sound levels in my head. When I got down to 114 feet, and I literally planted myself at 114 feet on the bottom of that ocean bed, I broke the #1 cardinal rule in scuba diving, and I held my breath. You're never supposed to do that. Don't do that at home. But at 114 feet, I held my breath because I didn't want my respirator to be blocking out the sound. I could not hear my tinnitus. I had roughly 30 seconds of all I could hear was the ocean. And that is the closest I've come to silence in 32 years. So I believe there's a connection. Friends of mine who also have tinnitus have also noticed that depending on the weather, a high pressure day or a low pressure day, that their tinnitus might be louder or not as loud, depending on the pressure. High pressure is generally associated with a sunny day because it pushes all the clouds out. And that high pressure, I find I have lower levels, sometimes by a little, sometimes by just a little more. Low pressure days, it can be a little higher. So at 114 feet below the surface of the water, I've got a bit of pressure going on down there. I am a firm believer, although it's not tested, it is anecdotal only. I'm the guinea pig or the yardstick, depending how you look at it. But I do want to get together with somebody to see if they could put me in a hyperbaric chamber and test it.
Excellent. Hey, Scott, somebody would like to see the pillow. Do you happen to have one nearby?
I do. Let's see if okay, so I'm not quite as proficient with some of this as maybe I should be. So I'm going to try to pull up a screenshot here so that I'm not just running over to my bed.
And while you're doing that, talk about washing. Somebody asked about washing.
Yeah. Well, so the speakers are hardwired into the pillow. So in order to clean the pillow, you have to hit it with sort of a damp rag, kind of wipe it down a little bit. I'm about to do a screen share if you'll allow.
Sure.
And we're going to bring this up.
Okay.
Is it there?
Yep.
Okay. You have to give it like a light wash with a towel or washcloth with some mild soap or detergent. Make sure you're not allergic to it. And then I'll hit mine with a little Lysol every now and then, or a little Febreze. Always use your own pillowcase. That will help protect it and keep it clean. And some folks like to add a pillow protector as well.
Okay. Now, is that battery? Tell us how it actually operates.
It is. The MP4 player, often referred to as an MP3 player, same thing, only slightly different, has a ridiculously long battery life. On a full charge, you'll get 30 to 36 hours on a single charge. I recharge my player about every 3 mornings.
Okay.
However, on occasion, I will forget to turn it off when I go to the office and I come back and it's still on. So if I don't discover that till right before I'm going to bed, you can actually plug it in and then listen to it all night while it recharges at the same time.
That's interesting. One of the other questions, hold on, I'm just looking really quick. Autism.
Yeah.
Can you talk about?
Go ahead.
Yep.
Yeah, we were in a clinical study with the Clinical Education Complex at Western Kentucky University. There was a universe of 50 folks on the spectrum, ranging from younger, 6, 7, 8 years old, all the way up to the 20s. And what we found was that it changed the behavior of the younger kids about wanting to go to bed and then staying in bed. One of the participants referred to the sound pillow sleep system as their magic pillow. And so when it was time to go to bed, mom would say, hey, it's time to go listen to your magic pillow. And they were excited. And not only that, then they stayed in bed because they weren't getting out. Very commonly with kids on the spectrum is they'll get out of bed and go sleep with the parents. Very intrusive. In the study of 50, universe of 50, we ended up with a 98% referral rate from the parents. I was actually really concerned at first that we were going to hit 100% and no one would believe it. So really happy to get that no. I wouldn't recommend it because you got it, you know. But a 98% referral rate. The study was never published. I don't know why. I have no control over those things. But the autism study is on our website, soundpillow.com. That's soundpillow.com, and under the reports tab. We also have anecdotal reports that include the military, including through the Marines, the Wounded Warriors Detachment, actual soldiers, male or female, who are in the hospital injured. They reacted very positively to it. We've worked with addiction recovery, with folks in addiction recovery who would lay in bed at night and just beat themselves up over everything they lost. And they reacted very positively to it as well.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Question, can a mate next to you hear the sounds?
Great question. And the honest answer is I don't know. And here's why. It depends on a number of factors. For example, my go-to track, as I stated earlier, is red noise. So when I laid down and I got to the red noise track, I had my wife laying next to me and I volumed up. I said, tell me when you can hear it. And she would say, okay, I can hear it. And I would say, then tell me when it bothers you. And I would turn it up more. And she goes, that bothers me. I said, cool. I dialed it back down. It worked for me. She is okay with the red noise. She doesn't like white noise. She's okay with the rain if she hears that. But it really depends on what volume you need to listen to it, what is the distance between you and your spouse, and then the hearing abilities or capabilities of the spouse. Because we work with a lot of folks who are older, so their spouse might have some impaired hearing, which then they can turn it up as loud as they want. The spouse can't hear it. But it does not disturb my wife, and that became a real key factor. But throughout the years, what we discovered was some folks have tinnitus so badly that we had to make it louder. And then sometimes you can cross over that threshold where the spouse can hear it, but then the question is, does it bother them?
Right, right. Maybe it'll help them.
We have spouses that say they put the pillow right in the middle of the two of them, and they both sleep on an end. It's got two speakers. I'm like,
I was going to say,
whatever works for you. And then
Yeah.
oftentimes we'll have a military spouse call and say, hey, I want to order one for me. I stole my husband's while he was out of town, and now I want to keep it. Well, that's great. Those are great things. It's not a magic bullet. As much as I wish it were, it's not a magic bullet. And to anybody out there who's looking for a sleep aid for whatever reason, what I recommend to folks is, one, if someone guarantees success, run. There is no guarantee of success. There is no pill that you can take that will make your tinnitus go away. The Shark Tank gummies were never on Shark Tank. So you really have to be mindful. The only guarantee I can make is that if it's not a good fit in somebody's life, you call me up. We'll walk through some usage tips. And if we can't get there, send it back.
excellent.
I don't wake up in the morning to chase the dollar. I wake up in the morning to chase making a difference.
Excellent.
And I have tinnitus, so I get it.
That's great. I thank you so much for being on today. And you are just so fascinating and a wealth of information. So thank you, Scott, for being a supporter and a
Sure.
sponsor at the Sleep Forum. I really
Are
do
you cool if I
appreciate
throw
it.
my email address out there in case anybody just wants to contact me directly?
Why don't you do that?
All right, it's very simple. I am Scott, SCOTT, at soundpillow.com. Scott@soundpillow.com. I also have OCSD, which is obsessive customer service disorder. So if you email me, I'm going to respond.
Okay, that is awesome. Well, thank you again for being on today. So
you.
appreciate it. And this is being recorded, so we will post this on our website. And thanks again, Scott. Have a
Wonderful.
great
Thank you. And
weekend.
thank you for everybody who joined us and is
And
watching
thank you, everyone.
in virtual.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Take it easy. Bye.